Rantum, welcome to Mint, the podcast. Thank you for being on. Special guest of season 6, all things on-chain data. How are you doing, man?
Oh, I'm doing great. Very excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
I feel like an idiot. And I'll tell you why I feel like an idiot. Because when I was planning season 6, I was like, okay, I want to do an on-chain data type of topic. And I should have looked at the wizards on Dune. And then I came across the wizards on Dune after I announced the season. And there you were in the top 5, created too many dashboards to even count. So I'm seriously stoked to have you on. And I think a good place
Oh,
to
I'm
start here.
I'm excited that you looked at that even. That's
You got it. All right. A good place to start is who are you, Rantum? What does the world need to know about you? And I'm specifically interested, like, how did you get your start into crypto?
all right. So let's see. I've been working in crypto data analytics for about a year and a half now. Got started early 2021. Had been, interested in crypto, held crypto assets before, but hadn't really been actively participating in it other than, I had different tokens, held them, but not much more than that. Um, Started getting interested more in NFTs actually, and that's what kind of drew me in initially with some Top Shot over their initial summer when they were first out before kind of got crazy, got out of it before it got crazy, and then got into sort of like the art side of NFTs. Before I was working in crypto, I was working in e-commerce, consulting with many companies, working in marketing, with web marketing, with data analytics in that area, and saw an opportunity to kind of transition some of those skills over to blockchain data. So started making some dashboards on Dune Analytics, and kept making them, and some of them have got me a lot of stars and moved me up those ranks, and help some people to find me once in a while.
I also know you're like a collector. I checked out your OpenSea profile, at least from what's public, and you've got a ton of NFTs as well. So I guess kind of seeing your interest from the Top Shot days, and then kind of seeing all these things that you've collected, and now being actually an active contributor. I consider your contributions as like you're like a participant in a DAO, and I think DAOs and communities have different levels of participation, and being able to create dashboards is just like another one of those elements of participation that I would sort of argue is super important. I'm curious though, of everything to kind of get involved in, why the data side of things? Because you seem to spend a lot of your energy on that side.
Yeah, I mean, part of it was that I was already interested in that side of it.
Sure.
And then the other part is that once you start looking into this, there's just endless amounts of data to keep looking at. I was used to working with data from individual companies, and it's very siloed data. You could maybe get some metrics of what other companies were doing, but it really wasn't open data that anybody could use. And obviously, we have a very different case with blockchain data that anybody can go and access this data, anybody can use it. Very different case that we have here, and I found that really interesting. You can look at all of these different things, both from whether it's a collector perspective, whether you're looking at tokens, but whether also as a creator looking at all this information is such a different world that we lived in with siloed Web 2
Right.
type data.
So when you look at the current like tooling landscape for data applications, and you sort of think about the different tools that are available for people to sort of either understand their communities, to either build communities, to understand certain metrics, what does your tool stack look like right now beyond Dune?
So yeah, Dune's my number one
Okay.
tool still. I use that pretty much daily, and I've definitely had to work with the OpenSea API quite a bit. I mean,
It's painful.
yeah, it's interesting because we do have all of this public data, but then we still have a lot of siloed data, and that OpenSea data at least is available via API. But really, we've got all sorts of different marketplaces out there, and if you're trying
Mm-hmm.
to look at that off-chain data in NFT specifically, you'd be looking at listings. Um, could be. I mean, listings are the big thing that you're looking for in NFTs, and they can be all over the place with different marketplaces popping up. So, trying to come to kind of wrangle that data in, different databases for that.
Mm-hmm.
Although it seems there are new tools coming or new options coming or I should say features coming to Dune that would
Sure.
make that easier to access right in their platform.
Got it. Got it. Okay. So I wanna talk to you about like a lot of this conversation on where like data meets the creator economy in Web3 and how creators should sort of be thinking about data. And I think a big trend that we're sort of seeing recently is this concept of community interoperability, building identity, credentialing, all these sort of keywords that I guess we didn't really see a couple of years back, especially when NFTs weren't at the sort of like premier type of spotlight in crypto as they are today. Um, how do you sort of understand the concept of community interoperability, audience interoperability in Web3? What does that really mean? Either users being the platform and they don't really need to rely on sort of like creating value on platforms, like they are the platform in crypto, right? It could also be taken from the point of view of understanding like you can take your audience wherever you go, sort of, and platforms are building around this interoperable, this open transparent ledger that possesses all this information. You know what I mean? How do you see it?
Yeah, I mean, so I guess I do see I see that audiences can move around. You would see that for artists, we'll see them produce on many different platforms, but their artists are following them around. When I'm looking at artists specifically, if I look at someone like Colby, one of my favorite artists, he might produce on Nifty Gateway, on his own contract, on
Mm-hmm.
Super Rare, and it's different, maybe different audiences in some degree, but it's really it's the same base audience that's kind of following him from platform to platform, and it's less there's some importance on the platform, but less importance on the specific platform to bring to go find that community rather than just bringing that community with him to that
Mm-hmm.
to these other platforms, and even enabling people to maybe use what they've already collected in the past to get access. And I think that's something that we're really seeing too, that you can use what the audiences have already collected, what they've done in the past, actions that you can see on the blockchain, and allow more when you move forward with another collection. It doesn't even have to be on that same platform.
Yeah, that makes sense. As an analyst and someone who spends a lot of time creating dashboards, either for your own interests or for sort of to help communities, what are some of the first few sort of dashboards you create to help a community understand who their users are?
So I try to give tools that I really try to make data more accessible in general. I mean, that's one of the things that I like to do with my dashboards is build them as tools that others can use, be able to plug contracts in, plug contract addresses in, or plug different wallet addresses, and be able to build something that people can then look into more. When trying to give insight to an audience for NFTs, specifically looking at what what other collections they might hold, what else they have in their wallet, um, and trying to look at that from a collection wide standpoint. Get ideas of what is this collector base interested in, what other things, trying to find the overlap. That's definitely something that I look at.
Got it. Okay. And when you sort of create these dashboards for communities, um, what tends to be like the most common metrics that you sort of look at and that you measure across either communities, like to measure like a community's health, to measure a community's engagement, and things around that nature?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one we're still developing a lot. Trying to
Okay.
understand how much engagement is there, because it's really different for different communities. How much you want someone to be active, at least on chain. When I think there's some issues in the NFT world where a lot of a lot of revenue is coming from royalties, and that requires people to be selling, and if people aren't selling, that's not necessarily a bad thing for the
Mm-hmm.
collection. So still trying to get some of that. Where is the engagement? How do you gauge engagement? But I think that I mean, obviously looking at the trends over time, the price trends, also how many holders there may be of a particular token or NFT collection, You see that falling off over time. That's generally,
Right.
generally people getting less interested. I mean, there are cases where you can see that the existing community members may be becoming more excited about the project, but usually see that, you can usually pick that out a little bit better. And that's also by
Hmm.
knowing who those holders are. Are they ones that are new to new to the ecosystem? Are they, existing holders?
Hmm. How many communities do you actually see using on-chain data actively in like the day-to-day process of building a community, trying to create unique experiences? Or is it very much like the top 1% of communities actually use data, despite all the dashboards that are out there?
It's a good question. For community building, I don't know that they're being utilized all that much yet. I think that we're at a point where there's so much opportunity that people are running ahead right now to try to
Hmm.
get somewhere before all the competitors do, and that some of the small data differences aren't quite coming into play yet. I think they'll become a lot more interesting as people start really taking the time to dig into them. I think there's a ton there for artists, for creators, especially when you start looking at what people are doing otherwise. I know you've talked about it on your podcast, how you've used it, use data and with your own tool to find what your audience was interested in. And I think
Hmm.
that's such a smart thing that many people are not doing yet.
Hmm. Interesting. Why don't you think many people are doing that yet? Like what's missing here?
Good question. I think some of it may be. Oh, I mean, sort of it was the first point. That I think people are running
Right.
to kind of stake their claim to different areas, but areas within this ecosystem. But I think the other side is it's still thought of as maybe more difficult than it needs to be. I think there's this idea that blockchain data must be really difficult to decipher, and it's it's much easier to just use these,
Right.
to look at OpenSea history or something for NFTs, or to occasionally go scan very easy to read things. And the truth is, I think a lot of these dashboards, a lot of these tools have made it very accessible, and people should start taking more time to look into this.
Hmm. You know, for me, I see the biggest setback with creators and communities trying to use data is trying to understand what action they can take by understanding and looking at that data. And my next question to you is, do you yourself have a mental model? It's one thing to create a dashboard, it's another thing to understand what to do with that information. Do you have a mental model yourself as to how you analyze information, whether it be a pie chart, whether it be a bar graph, whether it be a line, whatever the medium may be? Do you have a specific structure as to how you approach things?
Yeah, I think one of the reasons that some of my NFT dashboards specifically have become so popular is because I am active as an NFT trader, and I look at
Mm,
them much, trying to use it for my own purposes. And um, I think looking at what some of the other dashboards were out there when I first started creating them, they weren't. It seemed like they weren't getting into some of the details that
mm,
traders would need, and it's much more about kind of volumes and total transaction numbers. But that doesn't really mean a lot to when you're making an individual sale, or just some of the more detailed metrics that are happening, looking at things like how many sales is that really, what's the collection size,
mm-hmm,
what's the liquidity in a particular project. I mean,
mm-hmm,
I think a lot of times these big numbers, whether it's ETH or dollar, or whatever other numbers, are used kind of as a this big shock number, and it doesn't always mean a whole lot. Floor price is definitely something that you can look at more in NFTs. That's used often, and I think there's even more than that. When we see that there's little volume overall, and I don't just said that don't use volume, but trying to see volume over in turnover over time, inventory
mm-hmm.
turnover, how fast is the collection moving?
Right.
Trying to get a better idea than of um, some of the details of a particular collection, or
Sure. Sure. I think also another element to that is like going back to the question of there's a lot of data out there, but why aren't communities maybe not why, but maybe the argument is like a lot of communities maybe aren't tapping into that data on a regular basis. Um, I wanna pick your brain on another tangent of that is like how do you find the balance between using data to make a decision versus sort of following your gut? What does that balance and that trade off look like?
Yeah, man, I wish I had a, a very good answer for that because I think it is really hard right now. So much there is so much data, and I think you can use it to inform decisions. It doesn't, I don't rely 100% on data.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, I don't think that's even possible. So, trying to weigh those other, I don't know, those metrics that can't be measured as well, and is definitely tougher in this industry, especially when I think you probably know like how much sentiment
Right.
plays a factor in NFTs and crypto in general.
Right.
Um, I think I do actually try to keep an idea of what is the sentiment, what is the market sentiment overall, and try to keep an idea. Am I falling into something when I'm making a decision? Am I trying to confirm something that I'm hearing out there, or am I trying to look at this objectively?
Another thing I want to know about you, Rantum, is like what is a day in your sort of life look like? Because I see you've created so many dashboards. You're obviously living on Dune. You study data consistently. When you sort of create these dashboards and you're waking up in the morning, like is the first thing that you're doing sort of like building a dashboard or trying to find something new to create, or how do you sort of like I guess
Um, I think I got what you're asking there.
okay
I mean, I look at a lot of my dashboards. I try to build dashboards that mean something to me when I do look at them in the morning. Try to get an
uh-huh
idea of what's been going on, both in crypto and prices, token prices. As you know, there's often surprises when you wake up. So, I like to know what's going on a bit and build those dashboards. There's a lot of maintenance in dashboards, and whether it's because of when I'm using Dune, whether it's Dune updates or upgrades. Upgrades still require some work, but also OpenSea changes, different NFT marketplaces coming up,
mm-hmm.
and as much as there's as much as I like to rely on chain data, there's still a lot of manual data that needs to be put into Dune right now.
Mm.
A lot of collection names need to be put in there. So, update a lot of those things on my own. So I also do some work for Art Blocks right now. So maintain
Okay.
a few internal dashboards for them, less collector um, focused and more internal for them when they're trying to reconcile royalties and things like that. So those are those are always fun, getting little
Right.
differences and
Right.
finding those. But I like trying to build these dashboards that can be used over and over again, and no matter what, there's always maintenance that needs to happen. And then when new protocols happen, when new collections come out, definitely try to dig into that a little bit more and see what's going on.
Right. Right. I also want to talk to you about like new technology that's emerging in the ecosystem. I remember Vitalik recently proposed like a stealth address for anonymous NFT ownership. I'm curious if you have any thoughts around sort of that area, and also like with the introduction of like zero knowledge technology, how that would influence future usage and analysis of on-chain data.
Yeah, I thought about that. And one of the things that has attracted me, like I said, to this industry is the openness of data. But I also
Right.
think that some, there's some need for some privacy. I know that there's times where I don't necessarily want anybody that's paying me to see every single transaction that I've done. It's a little hard once once the wallet's public, and I think that there will solutions will become more easy to access, and not having to go through OFAC.
Right.
Yeah, things against their terms anyway. But so I think that some of this will change, and I do wonder how much it changes once kind of the blockchain part gets pushed a little bit more to the back end. I think right now people have a pretty good understanding of what it means to have to have your wallet public, and people that are in it. It's a pretty small number of people. It takes a lot of steps, and you almost have to interact with some of the underlying tech, and it makes you a little bit more aware of this. So I do wonder what happens when this becomes pushed kind of to where people can't see it, when you're just
Mm-hmm.
opening an app on your phone and it's running, on the blockchain, and you don't think about this. I do wonder how people what the what people will expect for data privacy at that point. So I think we'll see some shifts here. We may get to a point where we're seeing more. We see a lot of maybe second layer two type of activity rolled up that you can't see quite as well, can't see individually as well as you can some of the big transactions on the Ethereum network.
Mm-hmm. So what happens when that happens? Like what do you do as someone who spends so much time on Dune, someone who analyzes data and uses these tools as a way to kind of find your contribution in the space?
Well,
What?
I think one thing to keep in mind is if we do have good privacy solutions, that there's still going to be standardized, and it won't be quite as much as build a website and now you've got to go figure out all your analytics, and
Sure.
all your data is going to look different. It's still going to be standardized, and maybe it won't be public, but it's still there for companies, creators, whatever, that are ready to use that data. It's a little bit more, probably a little more. Um, I mean, I wouldn't say it's Web two, because I think you're getting user data, but you're not getting at that point you wouldn't know the individual person. So it provides a lot more privacy for individuals, but I think there's still a lot of data that you can work with publicly, and be able to take steps to improve your audience.
Yeah. The next thing I want to talk to you about is, I guess, like the current state of where we are in the creator economy. You obviously spend a lot of time collecting stuff yourself. You spend a lot of time analyzing communities. What are some interesting trends, insights, notable things that have sort of sparked your curiosity or attention that you've discovered by being on-chain data analyst?
Let's see. So in real life events, I think, are really big
Okay.
for blockchain communities. I think that's something that's really helped a lot of communities that I've seen, to kind of grow more and even grow together a little bit further than you could online. I think these online communities are great, for bringing people together, but also people want to get together in real life, and I've seen that in many different communities. And I mentioned that I do some work for Art Blocks.
Mm-hmm.
They do event, or they're doing a big event in Marfa, Texas, but they've done some other events, more with Bright Moments is another company I've worked with, a gallery down in based in Venice Beach, but they've been going around to New York, Berlin, London. The next one's in Mexico City coming up. And Art Blocks has a lot with them, and I see that brings a lot more people out, and you see people from different cities and kind of coming out from the crypto communities that are there. And I think that's, I mean, I got into a lot of this when we were all staying inside, and like many of us, and I definitely appreciate getting together with people.
Right. Interesting. That's another, like, okay, now it's about to spark a side tangent.
All right.
What metrics do you look at to sort of measure community uh, uh, togetherness, and how different wallet addresses are interacting within one another, amongst one another, right? And and I guess I asked that question because when you're looking at on-chain data, or when you're looking to understand how your community is performing, primary sales, secondary sales, total volume lock, like these things could only say so much. But if you're trying to build longevity, right, you want to see how your community is sort of interacting amongst themselves, right? Are there any metrics or anything that you've sort of seen or worked on that indicate, kind of like the strengthening of a community?
I don't think I have. It's a good question. I think those are some good metrics to start measuring. I think right now when we're looking at these, we're looking at things like vote. People are participating in votes
Right.
and governance. You can see that on chain. I wouldn't say that that's a great indicator of people coming together.
Mm-hmm.
Although I do think that participation in votes is a sign of at least people paying attention, as it usually doesn't take all that much to sign a transaction and do that. I think that's something that I've worked on actually with the Uniswap team. We've looked at a lot of um, issues around the governance there and how much participation there is, because there are cases. I mean, they had an issue where there was nearly a improvement proposal passed that was not very favorable to the community, and that was one where there just weren't very many people voting at a certain point. So, I think that is something that is important, and it's nice to see. I think we're still coming up with more. Um, need to come up with more ways to gauge how communities are evolving over time.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're probably. It seems like we kind of need to have off-chain data linked with on-chain in some way. I mean, when we've got most of the activity for these communities happening in Discord and more Twitter,
Right.
you've got to start looking at those when you're looking at community activity more than just on-chain
Right.
activity.
Got it. Okay. The last question that I have for you before we wrap up is, in the beginning we talked about how communities, they're using data, but maybe not as frequent as they should. Right. Um, and for it could be for many different reasons. My question to you is, how can one become a more data informed creator, more data informed founder, more data informed community builder? What do you think about that?
So I think every creator, every artist should have some kind of dashboard of their own. When I'm thinking about NFT artists, I'm thinking about artists that are all over the place on different platforms. I think that having a dashboard for can give so much insight both to the creator and to the audience. You can see when we're talking about all these different blockchain assets, you can see where they all are, where they're trading. And yeah, it may not all be about trading, but it's nice to know where they are and what people are doing with them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when you start looking at that as a creator, you can start understanding who the people are, what else are they doing on chain, what other collections might they have, what other tokens do they have, are they new wallets, are they, is there a long history there? And I think it's even worth just reaching out directly to some of them. I think in many cases when you see that if someone has a lot of assets that you've put out, definitely worth reaching out and seeing what brought them to you, if you can find more like
Right.
that.
Right.
I think right now, like you said, there's a little bit of a problem. What do you do with some of this data? And I think we're at the point that it's a little bit of you got to get creative with it. Figure out what to go do with it. But I think really understanding it kind of or digging into it and understanding it will kind of spark ideas if if you're in that mindset
Mm.
anyway.
Mm. Okay. That's super interesting. Rantum, before I let you go, where can we find you? Where can we find your work? I know you're also a contributor to our network as well. I saw that in your bio. Yeah, shill it away. Where can we learn more and stay in touch?
Yeah, I'm Rantum Bits on Twitter, and you can find me also rantum.xyz is my site. And yeah, reach out if you have any questions about data analytics.
Amazing. Till next time. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.